I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Hey everyone, welcome back to the News du Jour, a calmer space to consume the news. So from now on, I wanted to let you guys know that here at the top, we will start each episode with announcements, basically as we have been doing. But then any mini stories that I have, sort of like 1 sentence, 2 sentence stories that I just kind of wanted to update you on, we will have those right following the announcements from here on out, just quick little statements. If you ever want to hear more about a specific mini story, definitely be sure to let us know via email or social media, and we will squeeze it in to the next episode. I also want to remind you guys that you can always read the News du Jour online. So that's on our website. If you hover over podcast, it will drop down a menu and transcripts will be where you can read the News du Jour every time we post. So if you prefer to read it, that's where it's at. So for our mini stories today, we'll go over basically 3 different things. First up, a special master in Trump's Mar-a-Lago case has been thrown out. So the judge ruled that there's not going to be a special master. How that will affect the case, we will dive deeper on once there's some more traction, and we'll discuss sort of the pros and cons there. Next up, the U.S. is out of the World Cup. They lost to the Netherlands, so that was a huge bummer for those of us rooting for them, but they got pretty far, so not too shabby. Lastly, Pence says that his lawyers are in touch with the Department of Justice. So it's still unclear whether he'll be taking, the stand when it comes to the January 6th committee, but his lawyers are talking to them about the situation. So that is some movement, and we'll keep you guys posted if we hear anything else on that subject. So for our first full story today, we're going to go over some Ukraine updates. First up, over 50,000 different investigations are currently underway for war crimes having taken place in Ukraine. These are largely individuals who were just walking down the street at the wrong time, and the Russian troops just decided to kill them. Many were tortured and then killed. These killings of civilians were nothing short of brutal, you guys. They were not just looking to kill someone, these Russian troops, but to inflict pain on their victims. And now there is a growing movement to document these cases and catalog as much evidence as we can for governing bodies to review, whether now or in the future. During this wartime, too, women have actually taken up arms in large numbers. About 60,000 different women are now serving in the Ukrainian military, even some grandmothers. Many women have actually also volunteered to act as spies. There is a distinct sense of unity right now in Ukraine where it's all hands on deck. And actually, in both traditional cultures, Russian and Ukrainian, women are pretty underestimated. And now Ukraine is looking for help from anywhere they can get it. And thus, women are stepping outside of those traditional roles and really helping to turn the tide of this war. They didn't even have military uniforms for women in Ukraine yet. They're wearing men's uniforms, you guys. But Russians still do not think that women are capable of serving in the military, and that discrepancy is giving Ukraine an edge. And in further Ukraine news, Biden has now come out as saying that he is willing to talk to Putin about Ukraine, but only if he is, quote, looking for a way to end the war, end quote. France has been a big fan of dialogue since this conflict broke out. They're really advocating for that. They're trying to act as sort of a go-between and foster understanding between both these conflicting nations. So it's, pretty obvious that this decision was influenced by France visiting the White House, which many people described as a love fest, but essentially any issue that France and the US had in recent past is out the window, especially in light of what's going on in Ukraine. War has a way of making certain problems seem small. And while France had been feeling excluded at times when the UK and the US were kind of acting alone, we're all stepping in sync now and leaving those disagreements in the past. And then next up, you guys, I have a really, really sad story to cover. So Noodle has passed away. Do you guys remember the dog who did the bones or no bones? We actually talked about him here on the podcast back during the pandemic when everyone was down and really needed a lift in their spirits. And now, unfortunately, we have to mourn his passing on here. You see, in case you missed it, because our audience has grown quite a bit since the pandemic, Noodle was a 14-year-old pug who had the world's sweetest owner named Jonathan, and Jonathan would lovingly try to help his elderly dog stand each day in his dog bed. If the dog chose to stand, it was a bones day, like as in he had bones in his body to help him stand up. And that meant it was a day where everyone should go out and conquer the world just like Noodle was going to do. But if he flopped back down into his bed when the owner tried to stand him up, as he often did, it was a no bones day. And what that meant was it was a day for self-care, self-love, rest, and restoration. Jonathan would report the day, bones or no bones, each day during the pandemic to the joy of his 4.5 million followers. We were all very invested in Noodle, but beyond Noodle alone, there was something really special about the love and connection between Noodle and Jonathan. Jonathan put down special carpet pathways in his home for Noodle to walk on. He dressed Noodle in a hooded raincoat for the rain. He called Noodle a king. And it was heartwarming to share in their very sweet love. Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing Noodle with us. We hope you're doing okay. Noodle will always be loved and remembered thanks to you. And now, of course, we have to cover the disbanding, technically, of the morality police. Here we go. So finally, there has been some movement in Iran. The women of Iran and their allies have obviously been fighting very hard since September to overthrow a regime that did not allow them basic freedoms. And now they're getting at least some traction, maybe, not really. The government has agreed to disband the so-called morality police who killed 22-year-old Mahsa Amini and kicked off these deadly riots. Now, change is likely to be meaningless here, as it is very possible for them to disband one kind of police and put something similar right in its place. Here's a clip from our friend Elika Laban and what she had to say on this subject. Elika said on a recent TikTok, quote, "Ask yourself this question. Is there still compulsory hijab in Iran? Okay, if the answer is yes, then what does that mean? It means that this law is mandatory and that that law must be enforced. If there's no enforcement of the law, then it's not a law, is it?" End quote. And that just underscores the fact that there will be some way of enforcing this at some point, or else it won't be a real law. It won't be a real rule. So, while that's everyone's hope that it's not a real rule, we know better at this point where the regime is going to land. The only upside here is that it shows a shift from their hardline, let's just kill all the protesters outlook that they had previously taken. It shows that they're scared. This news was reported on Saturday night, but will likely not be enough to quell the protests because this movement has now gone beyond the hijab and the female dress code. It has come to represent this wide variety of issues like censorship and control over the Irani people in general. They want a new type of government, one that does not surveil or control their people. And right now, it's pretty impossible to imagine this government changing drastically enough to look like what the Irani people want, what they actually are, in fact, demanding. And then last up for today, we are discussing Kanye suspended from Twitter yet again. So Kanye has been yet again suspended from Twitter. It's almost like he wanted to see how far he could push Elon Musk. He posted a swastika to his freaking Twitter, and I bet he is going to try to play the victim here yet again, like no one understands the deep, vast meaning behind a freaking swastika. But Elon Musk apparently considered this an incitement of violence, and so here we are, back to the quiet. Hallelujah. And that is the news du jour. Today, I wanted to leave you guys with the quote, "Success is built when no one's watching." If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use to listen. A rate and review or shout out on social media would mean the world to us and help us be able to keep creating the news du jour. But the best way to support all of our work is to become a patron at www.patreon.com/sugarfreemedia. You can also follow us on social media under sugarfreemedia.co on Instagram and just sugarfreemedia, all one word, on TikTok. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from